Let's see. You notice two differences in this panel up here from the previous ones. One, there's only three of us, and number two, we're a lot younger than the previous panels. All right. The reason why is because we weren't around. We weren't working on this job when everybody else was working on the Corona program. Our panel is different. We're going to tell you what's going on right now with the data that everybody else talked about. I'm from the Central Intelligence Agency. I've been there about 25 years, and right now the Central Intelligence Agency owns all this data. I'm the manager for what we have at the intelligence community called the environmental program. And in your book and in some of the handouts you got, they talked a little bit about two task forces that were started years ago. One called the Environmental Task Force, one called the Classification Review Task Force, which recommended back in 1993 that this data be declassified. There's other recommendations, and the environmental program is responsible for implementing those recommendations. That's why I'm sitting here in front of you. What our job is for this task is to find it all, index it all, and transfer the ownership of this data from the Central Intelligence Agency to John Dwyer over here at the National Archives, with a copy going to the U.S. Geological Survey, Al Watkins. Now, let me introduce these two people to you because they're the important people, because they're going to make this data available to the public. So, if the public is out there and wants copies of this data when it's ready, don't come to the CIA. John over here is he's presently the chief of the cartographic and architectural branch of the National Archives and Records Administration up in and that's up in College Park, Maryland. He's responsible for the preservation and public accessibility to more than 13 million maps, charts, aerial photographs created for and presently used by federal government agencies and held as permanently valuable historical records. That's what's going on. So this 860,000 images, you know, he's got a lot more than that up there already. So Al Watkins, who will speak after, is the present chief of the National Mapping Division in the United States Geological Survey. And you know, prior to when Al came to USGS, he was with NASA and responsible for the development and testing of onboard propulsion power and life support systems for manned flight vehicles, and also involved in remote sensing research, including satellite sensor development, data handling, and processing. When Al joined the U.S. Geological Survey in 1973, he directed the Earth Resources Observation Data Center in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. That is a satellite imagery archive of where a copy of all this data will go in the next year. In 1991, he came to Western Virginia and became chief of the National Mapping Division. So, my job is simple. I mean, it's to transfer the data to them. Now, there's a lot larger team to do this than the people you see at this table. Let me mention a few of them, and I'll say how their agencies are involved. The National Photographic Interpretation Center of the Central Intelligence Agency has the original copy of the film. There's a person there by the name of Lynn Walker. He's amazing. He seems to know where everything is, which is surprising. I'm sure a lot of the members in here, when they say, "Oh yeah, I remember somebody who has something," and you go back and says, "Yeah, I think I tossed that about 20 years ago," you know. But Lynn knows where everything is that exists today. The Defense Intelligence Agency. Tom Potts, he works at the Defense Intelligence Agency, and back in about 1966, DIA started to receive a copy of all the film. and they still have it, and they're giving it back, and we're using that in this final transfer. The other thing that DIA has, which is very helpful to us in saving us a lot of money, is they have a computer readable index to about 80% of the images that were taken during the Corona program. That's very usable, and it's going to be used a lot by public and everybody else ultimately, and I'll tell you how we'll get there. Dave Ackerman of the U.S. Geological Survey, he's been detailed to our office, and he's the project manager to make this happen from inside the CIA. USGS also received a copy of the Corona United States coverage during the days of Corona, and still have that, and are returning that to us so we can use it in this transfer. Just numbers, and I'll get into some numbers a little bit later, but there was about 40,000 images taken over the United States. It's only about 5% of the total amount that Corona took, but it's still a significant number. MITRE Corporation and McLean helped us with this initial planning to get us to where we are today, to get us to the declassification ceremony that happened at CIA headquarters in February. We have contracted with Eastman Kodak in Rochester to duplicate whatever film that we need to make these working copies. We are presently negotiating a contract with Hughes Corporation to create the full index to this imagery. I have to say, last but not least, there's a small business in Waldorf, Maryland called B&B. When we found that we were missing about 200,000, 25% of the computer-readable indices to this imagery, Lynn Walker found the 25-year-old computer printout of the satellite positions at the times that these images were taken. We entered into a contract with B&B, this small company out in Waldorf, and they entered these 200,000 satellite positions into the computer by hand. So, we got that behind us. I'm going to tell you a little bit about numbers here, and it's kind of boring. I don't have a whole lot of stories to tell because I wasn't there at the time, but let me tell you a little bit of statistics, and hopefully you won't get bored. From August 1960 to May of 72, Corona took about 866,000 images. And that, I averaged that out, and it averages about one image every 10 minutes for 12 years. The original images, when you look at on the film, they're on about 400 miles of film. And the film was packed in about 17,000 cans. Cans look like this. They're 70 millimeter, nothing in them. 70 millimeter format film. It's about 2.5 inches. This header that was placed on the film after it came down and was processed and put in the can reads, handle via talent keyhole, warning, this document contains classified information affecting the national security of the United States, etc., etc. And as we started this program, this project, there was a question of whether the words talent and the words keyhole were going to be declassified. So NPEC, when they started looking at to see the original cans, to see what shape they were, started to cut these off. So I got one. We're not doing it anymore because the words talent, keyhole, as you see in the handouts you have, is not classified for this project anymore. Besides film and besides indices, computer data, there's something else. We produce a lot of paper. We have about 400 cubic feet of paper. Now, USGS says, I don't think we want a copy of that. So the original, and only the original, is going over to the National Archives. This paper contains things such as mission coverage plots, a map of, and you see some examples of them back here. It contains some technical reports. It contains the camera models, the mathematical model which represents the camera itself and how it was used. There's a whole miscellaneous group of other finding aids that exist on paper, and it'll be sent over to the National Archives. People have been talking about this film, and you've been looking at these poster boards behind us. Well, it doesn't quite look like that. Kind of looks like this. And if it looks white from anywhere back there, that's because that's clouds. About 50% of the imagery is clouds. Now, over here I talked to some photo interpreters before I walked up here, and I said, what is this? Looks like clouds to me. And they said, wow, but over here in this little spot, this mountainous section, there's some real intelligence there. Well, turns out that this one's Colorado, so I'm not. But what I'm holding here is a 5-inch roll of film. Argon and lanyard moved to a 5-inch format, but the bulk of the film is 70 millimeter, and it's about 2.5 inches, something like that. We were doing this, we were duplicating this on a 5-inch film as an experiment to see what's the best way to make copies. Now, what we're going to do is, like I said, there's 17,000 of these original cans, and I got this one courtesy of the Defense Intelligence Agency. We're going to take these original cans and a working copy in 17,000 more cans and send them off to the National Archives. We're going to send a working copy, 17,000 of these cans, to the U.S. Geological Survey in South Dakota. And the index itself kind of fits on one little tape like this. It's be a computer index, and when I say index, it's pretty simple. It's the 4 latitude, longitude corner points of the image on the ground, the time it was taken, and the date it was taken. That is the index. Doesn't tell you whether it was cloud covered. Now, this index will be created, and in a few months, and I'll get the schedule in a minute, but in a few months will be sent out to the USGS in South Dakota. What we're also creating is a reduced resolution digital image, what some people may call a browse image, and I'll tell you what the word browse comes from. And that fits on about 220 of these tapes, so it's not that much, not a big volume. The browse image is necessary because a user to go in and look at this data has to know before they order it, before they put their hard-earned cash on the line, whether it's cloud covered or not. So the browse image will be able to tell you. You'll be able to look at it and say, well, yeah, that's cloud covered, or that's not. That's a good one, etc. The U.S. Geological Survey has, and one of the reasons why we entered into a partnership with them is they already have and there's some brochures in the back, a global land information system available on the internet. And this index data, computer readable and browse image, will find its way to that and be available out through the internet to the public for free. I mean, so far. So far, you would be able to get on there and look at the index, and maybe Al will tell you a little bit more about the Global Land Information System. Schedule. I'm going to talk a little bit about schedule. The executive order that was signed by the president said that this imagery that I just showed you is still classified. This imagery is still secret. It is still secret until the ownership is transferred from the Central Intelligence Agency to the National Archives. So that's why you see me carrying it around in a bag. I don't leave it down anywhere. The schedule is that we expect to be done the indexing, the computer indexing, by about September, and we'll be sending that over to the U.S. Geological Survey, and I believe it takes them about 2 months to get that up into the Global Land Information System. The browse images and the working copy and the original will be sent to South Dakota and Maryland in stages. And we have it staged out between, let's see here, kind of between October and February. And after it's staged, it's sent out there in these multiple deliveries, multiple tractor-trailer trucks. They'll have it available a few months after we get it to them, available to the public. And as we send this stuff out, we transfer the ownership to National Archives. That's enough about data. I mean, in your handout, there's this, it's called the Aral Sea shrinkage. It shows a Corona satellite on the left-hand side and an unclassified NOAA satellite on the right-hand side. I just want to point this out because this is the expected use, one of the expected uses of this imagery, this historical imagery, for new non-military, non-intelligence purposes. This picture we presented at a CIA booth on Earth Day. If you were out there on Earth Day on the mall, you get a copy of this. It shows what the Aral Sea in Russia looked like in 1962, what it looks like today, in 1994, being an unclassified satellite, and the significant shrinkage of the Aral Sea between those two dates. And we were over in Russia, and we showed them this picture, and they said, "Yeah, we know." Due to irrigation problems, not problems, due to irrigation, period. I just want to state one other fact. People talk about the Corona history and what came before it, but let me one thing, that there's a poster board behind me with a comparison of the KH-4, the Corona, to Landsat. Landsat has been continually operating United States, by the United States since first launch, July of 1972. Well, I don't know if you remember, but we talked about the last Corona image was May of 1972. So we have just increased the amount of historical satellite imagery available in an unclassified form back another 12 years, from 72 back to 60, when this release is complete. Now my job's reasonably easy. I don't have to deal with the public, and now I'm going to turn it over to John and Al, because they do. So I'll let John go next.
Thanks, Bo. The Archives, as many of you know or may not know, is the agency of the federal government that holds the historically valuable permanent records created by other agencies of the federal government. That is really why it's coming. The original negative is coming to the archives. Bo has his statistics, which he may find boring, but I find massive. And we're talking about 34,000 cans of film, half duplicate positive and half original negative, and those are going to be processed by parts of my staff, which will be part of a team of 7, basically. So when the material comes over to us, give us a little breathing space, and we will be happy to make it available to you as soon and as easy as we possibly can. Right now, I would like to say we just have this can of film. This is the only can of film that is in the archives. It is mission number 1020-2, June 16th of 1965. If you want to come out to the building this afternoon, you can take a look at it. And I also would like to indicate that over on the my far right over here, this first panel, the Soviet ballistic missile complex, if you look at the bottom of that photo, you'll see a long, narrow strip. That is basically what the negative is going to look like. That is the size of this film. The image size varies from 4.5 by 4.5 inches, which I think was in KH5, and to 4.5 by 25 inches. The majority of it, as I understand it, is 2.25 by 30-inch negatives. It's a totally different system from what us in the archives are used to dealing with, and it's going to take some learning to go on. I was thinking about this earlier, and we can look at it as excitement or as a burden, but all of you people who were working on this at the beginning and all the excitement that seemed to be there for you, I think that you have shifted that excitement to us, and the public access to this is going to make it even more exciting and more demanding. The total volume is going to be about 2,500 cubic feet of material, 2,100 cubic feet of film, and about 400 cubic feet of reference and camera manuals, as Bo mentioned, and of mission coverage plots. Our job is to make sure that this material...
Talk about the Corona history and what came before it. But let me one thing, that there's a poster board behind me with a comparison of KH4, the Corona, to Landsat. Landsat has been continually operating by the United States since first launch, July of 1972. Well, I don't know if you remember, but we talked about the last Corona image was May of 1972. So we have just increased the amount of historical satellite imagery available in an unclassified form back another 12 years, from 72 back to 60, when this release is complete. Now my job's reasonably easy. I don't have to deal with the public, and now I'm going to turn it over to John and Al, because they do. So I'll let John go next.
Thanks, Bo. The archives, as many of you know or may not know, is the agency of the federal government that holds the historically valuable permanent records created by other agencies of the federal government. That is really why it's coming. The original negative is coming to the archives. Bo has his statistics, which he may find boring, but I find massive. And we're talking about 34,000 cans of film, half duplicate positive and half original negative, and those are going to be processed by parts of my staff, which will be part of a team of 7, basically. So when the material comes over to us, give us a little breathing space, and we will be happy to make it available to you as soon and as easy as we possibly can. Right now, I would like to say we just have this can of film. This is the only can of film that is in the archives. It is mission number 1020-2, June 16th of 1965. If you want to come out to the building this afternoon, you can take a look at it. And I also would like to indicate that over on my far right over here, this first panel, the Soviet ballistic missile complex, if you look at the bottom of that photo, you'll see a long, narrow strip. That is basically what the negative is going to look like. That is the size of this film. The image size varies from 4.5 by 4.5 inches, which I think was in KH5, and to 4.5 by 25 inches. The majority of it, as I understand it, is 2.25 by 30-inch negatives. It's a totally different system from what us in the archives are used to dealing with, and it's going to take some learning to go on. I was thinking about this earlier. We can look at it as excitement or as a burden, but all of you people who were working on this at the beginning and all the excitement that seemed to be there for you, I think that you have shifted that excitement to us, and the public access to this is going to make it even more exciting and more demanding. The total volume is going to be about 2,500 cubic feet of material, 2,100 cubic feet of film, and about 400 cubic feet of reference and camera manuals, as Bo mentioned, and of mission coverage plots. Our job is to make sure that this material is preserved forever and also to make it available to everybody and anybody who wants to see it. And upon completion of processing the material when it gets to us and when we do what work we need to do and getting it ready to put on the shelves and put in places so everybody knows where it is so that the staff can access the materials and pull the materials to answer research requests, and we will be right ready to make it available. It will be available at the facility in College Park. You can access this material after it comes to us, either in person by visiting the research room out there. You can write to us, you can fax to us, or you can email to us, and we will respond as soon as we can, usually if it's a written response, it's usually within a 10-day to 4-week process. It may be a little while and a little longer with this while the staff gets familiar with the material, so it normally is a reasonably quick turnaround time. Reproductions will also be available. We have on-site vendors which do all of our reproduction work now, and they will be reproducing the materials that are requested from this film. And the public is simply directed to a list of 10 vendors that we currently work with. They are on site, and the public and the vendor will work out what kind of reproductions they wish and what kind of costs are involved. The other category and part of the agreement with taking this film is that the film can be loaned back to the intelligence community, authorized representatives within 24-hour notice. So the film is always going to be accessible to the intelligence community. It's not taken out of their hands in any way. The volume of materials that are in the cartographic and architectural branch, the 13 million I just mentioned earlier, there's a lot of volume, but as far as our aerial film holdings go, these 34,000 cans will about double the volume of the cans we have now. We've got about 40,000 cans of film. Currently, mostly USDA photography of the United States up through the mid-40s, and a lot of German-flown, we call it GX photography, captured from the Germans. So this is going to double the volume of our holdings, and we're excited about it. We're tired about it because the volume is going to be massive with this. I have not prepared any kind of a handout to give you access to us at the moment because I'm not really wanting to encourage it because we don't have the material other than this can, and we have the negatives of everything you see on these panels plus the negatives of the 4 images released in February. I will tell you what our address, phone number, and fax number is now, and be more than happy to provide that information at a later date, but I don't want to hand something out too much right now so we don't get too many calls before we have the material. It will be in the cartographic and architectural branch of the National Archives, located at 8601 Adelphi Road in College Park, Maryland. Our phone number out there is area code 301-713-7030. Fax number is 301-713-7488. And email is carto@nara.gov. So if you could hold your requests until what are we talking? December at the earliest. I would appreciate it very much. So that's about all I have to say. Thank you very much.
John, I'm glad you gave out a phone number. I don't have one. Al?
We also are pleased to be here to talk to you a little bit, tell you a little bit about the way the USGS will make these data available, tell you a little bit about the complementary types of data that and how these will fit together with that data that's already held by the USGS, primarily in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Just a word or two about the Geological Survey. I think all of you know that it fundamentally is an earth science agency. It has three primary functions and three divisions to carry out those functions. The Geologic Division is responsible for the geologic studies of the country, for working studies associated with natural hazards, for mineral and energy potential estimates, those types of things. The Water Resources Division is responsible for the water quality, water quantity studies of the country, and the National Mapping Program, which is carried out by the National Mapping Division. Most of the association with the intelligence community and with the Defense Department on programs like Corona have been through the National Mapping Program, the National Mapping Division. Lowell Starr told you about some of the early activities that we were involved in, and we have a long history of both providing access to this type of data for civil agencies who have a legitimate need for it, and for coordinating the acquisition of this type of data that goes a long ways back. As I said before, most of this data will be made available through the EROS Data Center. A little history of the data center. It was started in 1973, and it was originally started in a partnership between the U.S. Geological Survey and NASA to make Landsat data available. Since then, it is, and to carry out research for the Department of Interior associated with the use of satellite data, civil satellite data. Since then, it's gotten into a number of other kind of activities and does serve a legislated responsibility as the National Satellite Land Remote Sensing Data Archive, which means that radar data from NASA missions, Landsat data, some of the image data from the NOAA weather satellites, and over 10 million frames of aerial photography that were flown as part of by the Army Map Service and the USGS as part of the mapping activities for the U.S. are present at the EROS Data Center. It has a well-developed, computerized online data access system where inquiries can be placed geographically as to what is available. Once that question is answered, standard products can be ordered online. Those orders are placed, and then reproductions are made not only of hard copy products, as we're talking about here today from Corona, but also all of the digital files from the Landsat program and other civil satellite activities. It also, where possible, keeps online reduced resolution browse film, since the nature of remote sensing is that clouds get in your way a lot and you need to know where those clouds are. That's the handiest way to do that. So you can make inquiries, you can look at reduced resolution browse material, and you can also place the order directly. Most of I guess the concept I carry around in my head is that the historians that are interested in viewing the copies and obtaining copies will probably work through John, will probably work through NARA. The image I carry around in my head is that most of the environmental scientists who are used to working with the data center for copies of satellite data for scientific purposes will probably continue to do that, since that's the access location for Landsat and for the other satellite remote sensing activities. I should mention that there is the staff of the data center is something on the order of about 400 people these days. They carry out a significant amount of research on the application, exploitation of satellite remotely sensed data, aircraft imagery, geographic information systems, land characterization kind of activities. So they will be using this data also, which in a scientific and an environmental and a resource management fashion, which I think helps to ensure the quality of the product that comes out of that center. The other roles, the other complementary data holdings in the future at the data center are things like Landsat 7. As you know, the current planning for Landsat 7, the next Landsat satellite, which would be launched by NASA and operated by NOAA starting in 1998, all the data from Landsat 7 will be received at the ERS data center and processed there and distributed from there under agreements with NASA and NOAA. USGS is a fundamental part of the Landsat program management structure in that regard. NASA's EOS data from Mission to Planet Earth, that data that's associated with the land and land-related data will also be processed and distributed from the ERS data center as part of their arrangements and agreements with NASA. So that's the basic location for most satellite imagery, either in digital form or hard copy form, that the resource management, science community, environmental communities will use. To say just a few words about the system we will use to provide access to this, it's known as the Global Land Information System. Bo referred to it. It is accessible through Internet. It is accessible through World Wide Web. It has a home page, a GLIS home page, and from there you can go to holdings that are at the ERS data center or at a number of other locations. The Global Land Information System was designed to be a locator and an access system for environmental information, environmental imagery of the world, regardless of where that data is held. And it has interfaces to many other archive locations. You can order directly, you will be able to order copies of this data and other holdings directly through online GLIS or by getting in touch with the data center or by visiting one of some 50 or 60 Earth Science Information Centers that are either operated by the Geological Survey around the country or are operated by states, state organizations in participation with the Geological Survey. In terms of prices, it will be priced in the same manner we price other satellite data and aerial photography. Generally speaking, hard copy, contact scale, negatives, positives, and prints will be in the order of $10 to $15. Our pricing policy is based on OMB Circular A130, which says you charge the marginal cost of reproducing the data and getting it to the user, assuming that the federal government has paid the cost of acquisition of the data and information for other purposes, which is very true in this case. Enlargements will be available, and prices will vary depending upon the processing and enlargement that's made. Some studies are going on right now in terms of how the data can be made available in digital form. That's a role that we think is probably most appropriate for the private sector, and we'll be working with the private sector to figure out how to make that happen. I think John mentioned that all of the supporting information, the camera manuals, the textual support data, all of that will be available from NARA and from John. We will not handle that. We'll just handle the imagery. We are committed to the agency to have all of this information online as soon as they have delivered all of it to us, and that is supposed to be complete by August of 1996 or so. And by online, I mean, once again, the reduced resolution browse imagery and the metadata that allows you the indexing and cataloging information that allows you to find out what you want. The full resolution imagery obviously is not being scanned. It's hard copy and won't be available online, only be available by mail or other types of delivery. We have, I think in February, there were 4 images released. Those were placed on Internet full resolution. That causes quite a, as you can imagine, downloading this kind of imagery across low-speed modems and through Internet is a nightmare and bogs things down pretty well. the most recently released 20 or so images, once we have those, we will not place the full resolution images on internet. The reduced resolution browse material will be available once it's created, along with the descriptive material. There will be, ultimately, all of this information will go on a separate server. It will be accessible through internet and World Wide Web, but it will be on a separate particular server to be able to handle it better. I think that just about explains everything that I need to explain. Rather than giving you phone numbers, I'm going to leave a copy of the GLIS Internet access information and user assistance phone numbers up here on the table. Anybody that would like to stop by and copy them down, I will leave that here for the rest of the day. Nice to talk to you, and look forward to answering any questions you've got.
Thanks, Al. As